Your site has 3 generators. 2 are owned, 1 is rented. How many of them are Scope 1? Most teams get this wrong before they've even opened a spreadsheet. Not because the formula is hard, because the boundary decision comes first, and most people skip it. By the end of this video, you'll have the exact test to classify every piece of plant on your site, and the 4-step calculation that follows it. Stay with me past the 3-minute mark, because that's where the misclassification trap that catches experienced practitioners lives. The one that isn't in the textbook.
Scope 1 is direct. It's emissions from sources your organization owns or controls. That covers combustion in your owned or controlled boilers, furnaces, vehicles, and process equipment. Everything burning fuel on your watch under your operating authority. What it does not cover is your purchased electricity. That's Scope 2. And it doesn't cover your supply chain. That's Scope 3. The GHG Protocol Corporate Standard, Chapter 4, draws this line, not as theory, as the boundary that determines which numbers end up in your disclosure and which end up in someone else's. Get this definition right first. Everything downstream depends on it.
On a construction site, Scope 1 breaks into 3 source categories. Not 1 total, but 3 separate streams, each with its own data requirement. First, stationary combustion. Your generators, your boilers, anything burning fuel in a fixed location on site. Second, mobile combustion. Your owned or controlled vehicles and heavy equipment. Excavators, dumpers, site vehicles, anything that moves and burns fuel. Third, fugitive emissions. This one catches people out. Refrigerant leaks from your site air conditioning and chillers. Venting from on-site fuel storage. Small in volume on most sites, but they exist, they're Scope 1, and they need their own data line. Each of these needs its own activity data stream. You cannot mix them into a single site fuel total and call it a Scope 1 calculation. The number won't survive an audit.
Before you touch the calculation, you need to answer one question. Which consolidation approach does your organization use? The GHG Protocol gives you 3 options. Equity share. You count emissions proportional to your ownership stake. 30% ownership, 30% of the emissions. Financial control. You count 100% if you control the financial and operating policies of the operation. Operational control. You count 100% if you have the authority to introduce and implement operating policies at the facility. This third one, operational control, is where most construction firms land. It's the default that fits the typical contractor-subcontractor structure. But here's what Chapter 3 of the Corporate Standard is clear about. Whichever approach you choose, it must be applied consistently across Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. You cannot mix approaches across scopes. Decide this first, then calculate.
Here's the trap that catches experienced teams. A rental generator arrives on your site. Your crew operates it. Your team refuels it. Your site foreman controls when it runs and when it stops. And someone on the reporting team writes Scope 3, leased asset, on the datasheet. Wrong. The GHG Protocol Corporate Standard, Appendix F, is explicit. All leases default to operational control unless your organization can demonstrate otherwise and document it. If your crew operates it, if you control when it runs, if you decide its operating parameters, that generator is Scope 1, not Scope 3, not someone else's problem. The only way that default flips is if you can demonstrate you lack operational control of the leased asset, and that reasoning has to be documented. The test isn't do we own it. The test is do we control it. Remember that.
Step 1.
Gather your activity data by source category, not as a site-wide total, by category. For stationary and mobile combustion, that means fuel consumed per source in liters, not kilowatts, not hours, not cost, liters of fuel. That's your activity data unit for diesel combustion. Where you have metered run hours, record them too. They're your cross-check against the fuel log. If the hours and the liters don't roughly agree, something's been missed or misrecorded. For fugitive emissions, refrigerant top-ups and leak events go on a completely separate data line from your fuel figures. Different source category, different factor, different calculation. They do not live in the same column. One more time because it matters. The most common reason Scope 1 numbers get audited and rejected is a site-wide fuel total presented as a calculation. It isn't. Break it out by source category before you do anything else. Once you have your activity data, you need an emission factor. And not just a factor, the right tier of factor for your reporting purpose. The IPCC gives us 3 tiers. Tier 1, IPCC default factors. Fastest, least precise. Fine for a screening level estimate or a pre-feasibility assessment. Not appropriate for a disclosed ESG inventory. Tier 2, country-specific or source-specific published factors. Your national government's conversion factor tables, published annually in most jurisdictions. This is where most construction site Scope 1 reporting sits, and where yours should sit for any number you're disclosing externally. Tier 3, continuous emissions monitoring or direct measurement from the source, reserved for high materiality emitters, where precision justifies the cost. Here's the point that gets missed in audit. Saying we used an emission factor is incomplete. Your auditor will ask which tier. If you can't answer, you haven't documented your methodology. Name the tier, cite the source. That's the standard. Step 3 is the one that doesn't get taught, and it's where silent errors enter your calculation. Emission factors are published on a calorific value basis, and there are 2 versions: gross calorific value, GCV, and net calorific value, NCV. These are not interchangeable. GCV is the total energy released by combustion, including the heat of water vapor. NCV excludes that latent heat. The factors are different values. Most UK government conversion factor tables are published on a GCV basis. If your fuel supplier data gives you consumption figures measured on a net basis, and you apply a gross factor, your calculation is wrong before you've multiplied anything. Check your fuel supplier datasheet. Find the calorific specification. Match it to the basis of your factor table. If they don't match, convert first, then calculate. This is a pre-calculation check. Do it before you open the formula. Step 4, the formula. And it really is this simple. Emissions in kilograms of CO2 equivalent equals your activity data multiplied by your emission factor. That's the entire calculation. Activity data times emission factor. Now, here's the mistake that appears in about a quarter of first-time Scope 1 inventories I've reviewed. Don't multiply the result by a global warming potential value on top. Most published CO2e factors, and I'm emphasizing CO2e, not CO2, already have the GWP weighting built in. The factor does the conversion. If you multiply by GWP again, you've double counted. Your number is materially wrong. It will be caught in a third-party verification. Check your factor. If it's expressed as CO2e per unit, the GWP is inside it. You don't add it, you're done. Same generator, same fuel log. Different boundary call, different scope. If your company has operational control, it's Scope 1. Count 100%. If you can demonstrate you lack operational control and you've documented it, it may be Scope 3, but you need that documentation. Most of the time, on most construction sites, with a generator your crew operates daily, it's Scope 1. That's the answer to the question we opened with.
4 misclassifications, each one specific, each one real. Run through these against your own current practice. First, we don't own it, so it's not Scope 1. Wrong. Operational control is the test, not ownership. Second, the CO2e factor I'm using needs a GWP multiplied on top. Wrong. If the factor is already expressed as CO2e, the GWP weighting is inside it. Don't add it again. Third, I've got a site-wide fuel total. That's my Scope 1 number. Wrong. A site-wide total is not a calculation. You need source category breakdown, stationary, mobile, fugitive, before you multiply anything. Fourth, I'm using a government conversion factor table. I can apply it to any fuel data. Not quite. The table may be GCV basis. Your fuel data may be NCV basis. If the calorific value basis doesn't match, your number is wrong before you've done the multiplication. One of these 4, most practitioners have made at some point. The ones who haven't are about to avoid it.
The boundary test comes before the calculation. Every time. No exceptions. Get that wrong, and every number that follows inherits the error. Not just Scope 1. Every disclosure that references it. What you've got now is the consolidation approach decision, the 3 source categories, the 4 calculation steps, and the 4 misclassifications that trip up experienced practitioners. That's a complete Scope 1 methodology. Next in this playlist, we're moving to Scope 3, specifically the 15 categories and which ones actually matter for a construction site. That video is already up, link in the description and on screen now. If this was useful, subscribe. This channel is built for practitioners, people doing this work on real sites, on real projects, with real disclosure deadlines. There's more where this came from.